0 out of 10. Too many bugs. Up until a year or so ago, Hollow Knight was completely under my radar. I had seen a few YouTubers mention it in passing, but I wasn't actively looking to find out more about it. It seemed rather dry and monotone to me. I just wasn't interested at the time. The only thing I thought sounded interesting was the music that I heard, and I'd only heard this small song bit from a few videos. Several years have passed now, and I'm a YouTuber myself, and I figured it was time I give this game a try. Hollow Knight never really stood out as something I'd enjoy, but I felt like I had to, since Hollow Knight was looking to be one of those kinds of games. What do you call them? Oh yeah, good. Even though I was never a huge fan of Metroidvanias, hearing my friends talk about this game half a decade after its release made me too curious not to try it. So I played it. And holy cow was I surprised. If you've watched any of my streams of this game, you already somewhat know how I feel about Hollow Knight, but I'm gonna try and gather my feelings in a more concise and intelligent manner. Let's do this. Here's how I feel about Hollow Knight. The story of Hollow Knight is quite a secretive and sorrowful one. It was also a story that I wasn't entirely sure of. I wasn't super intrigued by the story aspect of this game, as a lot of it is hidden throughout and takes some piecing together on your own to find out the whole story. Or, you know, you could just read the wiki. In Hollow Knight, you are the kingdom of Hallownest's last hope, and you must wander the carcass of this once great kingdom to lead it to salvation. Or something. I wasn't too interested in finding all the interesting story bits, since the game does it just fine on its own. Once I actually got around to finding out all the story, however, it was actually pretty interesting. The deeper story of the game is really intriguing, and I'd recommend exploring it as you play. That being said, there was a reason I wasn't super interested in the story, and that's the fault of the gameplay. In a good way, I mean, in a good way. Hollow Knight is ridiculously fun to play, both on controller and keyboard, although I mostly played on keyboard and rebound the controls half an hour in, so that might say something about the default controls on the keyboard. On controller, it was perfectly fine, no complaints there. The character you play as that no one can decide the proper name of is very responsive to inputs. This game is very easy to learn. At the start, you jump and attack, simple as that. But over time, you learn that you can attack downwards to bounce off of enemies in certain parts of the ground. Then you find that you can do spells with the soul you gather from hitting enemies. And then charms come into play, which bring an entire new level of complexity. This game is very difficult to master. Even 40 hours in of playing, I still didn't know what I was doing half the time. And that incentivized me to continue to play it even after beating it, which to me is really good. It's not exactly variety, but it goes a long way to make sure that each playthrough will be different than the last, considering all the experimentation that can be done with your route during the game, stuff like charm loadout, etc. The best part about playing Hollow Knight, in my opinion, was finally memorizing the layout of Hallownest for the most part, and not having to constantly look at the map to know where I was. Which is what I was doing at the very start, but after my first playthrough, I hardly looked at my map, and I even ended up removing the Wayward Compass charm from my loadout because of how little I was using the map at the time. There's nothing more satisfying than getting familiar with a game, and being able to blaze through it more smoothly than before. It's just an amazing feeling. When it comes to combat, it's almost all pattern recognition, although that applies mostly to bosses, whereas the basic enemies are a bit more random. I have no strong opinion on the pattern recognition style of gameplay that can be found in stuff like Hollow Knight or Dark Souls, but it's kind of a mixed bag. It's dependent on the boss. Sometimes it feels really easy to beat them, but some move super erratically and trip me up every time I try to fight them. So it's more dependent on how much you like memorizing things. But wow, was it satisfying to finally beat those bosses. For a goose that's never beaten or even played a Metroidvania game up until now, I have to say this was a perfect introduction to the genre, and makes me want to play other games like it. Now, I know I've only been speaking Hollow Knight's praises so far, but believe me, it has some issues. I have to warn anyone that might want to play this game, though, it's tough. I'm sure fans of the Metroidvania genre will have no problem blasting through this game, but for a first-timer like me, I spent what felt like ages grinding the same fights over and over again, not knowing what to do next, and just navigating Hallownest in general. If I had to split my total playtime into sections, I'd say about 9 hours were spent exploring the main story areas, 6 hours were spent on grinding bosses and other challenges, 3 hours at the end getting 100% for the true ending, and the rest was exploring mindlessly, not knowing what I needed to do next. So that's about 22 hours trying to figure out where I was going. That's an hour longer than the average playthrough. If you're not paying close attention, you can lose track of your goal and just end up wandering for ages like I did. This isn't a direct complaint towards the game, but maybe if there was some kind of hint option in the menu that at least told you where you needed to be going to find what to do next? Or maybe some kind of quest board in the menu? I'm not sure. The game isn't all that frustrating to play most of the time, but you have to know what you're doing. Most of my mess-ups and frustrations were caused by me not using a crucial element of my moveset, or being too stubborn about the way I fight an enemy. Speaking of the moveset, maybe I wasn't using my spells and abilities the right way, but a lot of the time I hardly ever used any spell other than the fireball because of how niche the uses of the other spells felt. Nothing really felt as effective as slashing at stuff with the nail over and over. That always seems to end up being the problem with a lot of games I play. Out of an entire huge array of moves you're able to use, only a small bit of them actually feel like they're useful. That might just be me, though. Now, earlier I said the controls were super responsive, which seems like a good thing, right?
Wrong!
It might just be a me problem, but when controls in games are hyper-responsive and I can alter my placement to such tiny degrees like that, I have a tendency to overcorrect and screw myself over, which became very frustrating when the platforming became more and more precise. Like the White Palace. Dear God. It wasn't too bad, but it was bad enough to be mentioned in the review, so that must mean something. Also, this isn't too much of a complaint, but there was a lot of stuff I had no idea I could do. And I probably wouldn't have found them out if I didn't have my chat to yell at me about it during the stream. Like being able to strike downwards and upwards with the nail. I didn't think to do that at all. Or the whole overcharm mechanic. Literally no idea. Both are neat, but man, did I feel stupid for not knowing about those the whole time. So, in terms of pros and cons, it's pretty balanced. But in all honesty, the cons are pretty minor. I enjoyed my playthrough immensely, but had issues due to the game being built around a certain way of doing things. Not that you can't play your own way, but you will have a little more trouble completing the challenges of Hollow Knight if you can't see the obvious solution, like me. Or you're just stubborn. Now let's talk about graphics. Before seeing the game, I'd only seen the knight's design, and I thought, seriously? What a little goof, I love him! But there is no denying that this game is gorgeous. The enemies all stand out from the backdrops, so there isn't much confusion as to where they are or what they're doing. And while the NPCs are minimally animated, at least compared to the enemies, they still have so much character, even with such simplistic designs. This also applies to the player character, who, despite having a diverse moveset, is also pretty simply animated. This is good because it doesn't take much focus away from important things like the bosses and platforming. Not to say that this little guy isn't important. I love him. Now what about backgrounds? Before I played this game, it seemed like all the areas were very samey in terms of appearance, and that kinda made me reluctant to play it. Granted, I was half right. All the areas don't stray too far from each other in terms of tone, usually staying muted and kinda somber. However, upon playing through Hollow Knight, each and every area feels distinct from one another, which was a pleasant surprise to me. And every area is just oozing personality. Crystal Peak combines the glimmering beauty with grimy industry. Green Path is serene, with a cautious overtone, as if you're never safe, which you aren't. The fungal wastes are hazardous, but full of life regardless, and so many other examples. There's some places I just can't use words to describe. Just look at everything about the City of Tears. Look at this! This game is ridiculously pretty, and I didn't even get into the storytelling each area does without a single word of dialogue. Not that there isn't dialogue, but it doesn't need it for storytelling. In terms of other graphical things, the effect animation looks good. I've never noticed it much in this game unless I was supposed to, which is probably a good thing. Shouldn't be too distracting. I only really had a lot to say about the designs and stuff. Hollow Knight as a whole is just a grand, regal feel to it with grim undertones, and it's really nice. Now for the sound. All the sound effects in Hollow Knight are very subtle, which I suppose sound effects are supposed to be. But they never really jumped out at me during my playthrough. Sometimes when I'm playing other games, the sound effects can end up being distracting. However, I never got distracted by any of these sound effects. The only time the sound effects grabbed my attention was when they were designed to do so, such as enemies telegraphing their attacks, getting hurt, a special ability charging, something that could kill you in one hit NES style, and other things of the sort. During combat, hitting and defending enemies is very crunchy and satisfying. Adds a little extra layer of sweetness on top of the fact that combat just feels nice to do. Alright, now that that bullshit's out of the way, onto the important sounds. The music. The music of Hollow Knight is insane. Like the art style, it never strays far from its overall somber tone. But holy cannoli is there a lot of variety in this game. Even with the more uplifting songs, it's clear that this kingdom is far past its prime. It's not usual that I like every song in a game's soundtrack. Like Punch-Out Wii, for example. One of my favorite games ever. I like most of the soundtrack, but Great Tiger and Disco Kid's theme, they're just like not on the songs I enjoy list. A Short Hike. One of my favorite games of last year. I like all of the music in that game, but it just all feels kinda samey. I don't know. The songs are all good in their own right, but if you were to listen to the soundtrack in one long sitting, it would sound like you're just listening to one long song. Even the original Mario Bros., which has like very few songs, it's very hard to not have a good song on that list. The castle theme is just like sandpaper on my brain. But Hollow Knight, every single song is a banger. And what makes it even better is the vastness of the soundtrack. The more the merrier. All different kinds of tones, intensities, styles, and the like. But what I love the most about the music is the emotion. Every song is brimming with emotional influence. Deep Nest genuinely unnerved me, and that's with me being tolerant of all the creepy bug stuff down there. Boss battles are all intense and thrilling. The music that plays in a specific boss is absolutely heartbreaking, even without the context. No pun intended, I nearly cried over the City of Tears music. It's so beautiful. Every song in this game is such a joy to listen to. I could gush about this soundtrack for ages. And it's all thanks to mostly one guy, Christopher Larkin. Thank you for giving me one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Give any other game a soundtrack like this, and it would instantly go up a point or two in my book. Okay, not any other game. I doubt this kind of music would have the same impact in other games because of how well it's tailored for Hollow Knight, but I don't know. Even if you had to show the soundtrack to someone that doesn't take video game music seriously, I feel like they'd have to give Hollow Knight some credit. Okay, no more gushing. I've got a show to run. Multiplayer? No. Variety. This game takes place in one set map. Granted, it's a big map, but this is all you get when you buy Hollow Knight. You can still visit the same areas to fight enemies and all that, but there won't be any new surprises. And I gotta say, there's a lot of stuff to do. It's similar to Breath of the Wild in that regard. Although Breath of the Wild is much larger in scope, so much so that there's stuff that people are finding out 5 years after its release. But the idea is similar. The main way that the devs incentivize multiple playthroughs are the achievements. Specifically the speedrunning achievements, which make you beat Hollow Knight within a certain time. I don't know about you, but I like a challenge. So in my few attempts to get that achievement, I didn't feel like I was dragging my feet to play it again. Not because it wasn't fun, which it is, but it never felt stale while I was playing through it again. Whether it was my second playthrough on my Nintendo Switch, or my several pitiful speedrun attempts I gave up on because I have ADHD or some shit. It's fun to play through, even after multiple attempts. It never got old, and that's fascinating to me. Even a short hike started to wear down on me a little bit after my first couple playthroughs. But not Hollow Knight. Man, I've got a short hike on the mind, I guess. Anything for downloadable content? Yes, actually. 4 pieces of downloadable content were released throughout the course of 2017. And maybe a tiny bit into 2018? All that matters is that it's out now. Anyways, the DLC covers a lot of ground, ranging from small fixes to the game to enhance the experience, new areas with new boss battles, or entirely new story chapters, which is something I didn't expect at first. But then I remembered this is Hollow Knight we're dealing with. I'm not going to go too in-depth in the DLC, since that's not what I'm reviewing right now, but I'd recommend getting them. They did good for my experience, and they'll probably do the same for yours. If you're worried about the price, don't be. They're all free as far as I know. Now for my favorite moment. It has never been this hard for me to choose a favorite moment. This game has so many memorable moments, it's absurd. The entertaining dialogue of the NPCs, the joy of finding the map seller after ages of searching, just sitting still and observing the scenery, letting the emotions of the landscape and the music just wash over me. The Dung Defender, such a charming character, not to mention his boss fight being fun. Anything involving Zote, no doubt the best character in the whole game. My first time entering the City of Tears, honestly, probably one of my favorite moments in a game ever. The first time I managed to beat the White Palace, all that frustration just fading and being replaced with pure satisfaction. And a whole bunch more. The fact that it's so hard for me to pick a favorite moment from this game ought to show you that Hollow Knight isn't screwing around when it comes to quality. So, in conclusion, how do I feel about Hollow Knight? Well, I absolutely love it. The game is fun to control, progression feels properly scaled, you're allowed to tackle the challenges of the game however you like, to an extent. The gameplay is only frustrating in specific short areas, but overall challenging in a fair way. The music is godlike, the storytelling got me emotional in some places, and man, it just looks good. Yeah, Hollow Knight is almost perfect to me. There's just a few aspects that prevent it from reaching that level. I don't want to sound biased, but I have to give Hollow Knight a 9 out of 10. Seriously, this game is really good. If you like platformers, Metroidvanias, dark colors, bugs, if anything like that interests you, you'll like this game at least a little bit. So, that's all I have to say about Hollow Knight. Positively fantastic. I kind of wanted to apologize for my lack of content recently. Up until now, I had been kind of running on fumes and needed a bit of a break. I never expected to be gone this long, but what do you expect after almost a year of this? Dear God, has it been almost a year already? Anyways, that's all for now. My name is Goose. I thank you very much for watching. And now I wait for Silksong to come out. Now go away.